Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're now watching Q News. Welcome to our special coverage of the 2024 U.S. presidential election. As Americans head to the polls, the race between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris has reached a critical turning point. With each candidate rallying their base and appealing to key battleground states, the outcome could define the nation's future direction on pivotal issues, including economy, healthcare, and immigration. As results begin to come in from swing states like Arizona, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, stay with us as we provide live updates, expert analysis, and insights into one of the most consequential elections in recent United States history.
Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? I don't think so.
You are rightly impatient for change. Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrail.
This election is a choice between whether we will have 4 more years of incompetence or whether we'll begin the 4 greatest years in the history of our country.
Consequences of him ever being president again are brutally serious.
She's actually not as smart. And we will make America great again.
And when we fight, we win!
Republican candidate Donald Trump has arrived at West Palm Beach as millions of Americans headed to the polls. Both Trump and the Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris predicted victory in their final day of campaigning, with polls showing the race is extremely close. Trump is due to cast his vote at Mandel Recreation Center in Palm Beach. Former President Donald Trump has urged supporters to head to the polls while casting doubts on the integrity of the electoral process once again. Trump suggested that his supporters are to blame if he does not defeat Vice President Kamala Harris. Later, Trump claimed that he has the silent majority and urged his supporters to speak up. The former president also sowed doubt about the security of voting machines. Famed talk show host Oprah Winfrey has joined Democratic candidate Harris on stage, where they aim to motivate voters ahead of the election day. Vice President Kamala Harris' final campaign rally in the 2024 presidential election was a star-studded event outside of the Philadelphia Museum of Art on Monday. A village in South India, where Kamala Harris has her roots, have gathered to pray for her victory. As millions of Americans vote, Harris has people rooting from her from thousands of miles in the state of Tamil Nadu in India, where her roots come from. And for further analysis, we're joined from Washington, D.C. by Swat Chubichu, Professor of Law. A very welcome, warm welcome, sir, to Q News. And of course, it's a special, of course, a historic date today that we're witnessing the U.S. elections, a historic, of course, with U.S. election. How significant is Trump's history of impeachments and the January 6th, of course, insurrection of in determining his legal and political standing in this election, sir?
Yeah, so thanks
Rather
for having
insurrection,
me.
sorry.
So it's a very contentious and tight elections, as you mentioned earlier. And there are like many issues that are discussed, and two candidates see each other as a threat to the nation. So Kamala Harris sees Trump as the threat for democracy. On the other side, Trump sees Kamala Harris as a threat to the nation. So there are like two different qualities that we see racing here. So when it comes to criminal cases and impeachment case to Trump, it's not actually so much discussed during the elections because there are other things that the United States public is much more concerned. One of them is economy. Especially the inflation that drives many public, towards Trump, and they see Trump as much more powerful in terms of economy. But another driving force is abortion. That is on the Kamala side because majority of public see Kamala Harris is much more stronger in the abortion case and especially women's rights. So we see a kind of a huge gap between males and females in terms of support and Trump and Kamala. So Kamala was successful in gaining support.
Sir, could Kamala Harris's mixed performance?
Can I get the question again? Sorry.
No, sir. Continue what you were saying. I thought that you finished your answer. Okay, sir, could Kamala Harris's mixed performance according to polls as vice president affect her eligibility or legal standing if she pursues a presidential campaign in the future?
So, can you repeat the question? I couldn't get it.
Sir, as Kamala Harris has mixed performances according to the polls, as Vice President of the United States, could this affect her eligibility or legal standing if she pursues a presidential campaign in the future?
I mean, there is no kind of like a legal case against her, and in the future, I think if she loses the election, I don't see she's going to be again a candidate for the Democratic Party.
Okay, sir, what role does law and order play in the candidate's platform legally, and how might it impact Trump's voter base in his campaign in battleground states?
So, the race is pretty much in these 7 swing states, and Kamala, Trump actually demonstrated Kamala as the extension of Biden administration because, as you mentioned, she's the vice president, but Kamala tried to kind of separate herself from Biden. But Trump actually, pretty much telling his constituents, his supporters, that Kamala is even worse than Biden because she is so progressive.
Sir, why do you see that Kamala is worse than Biden?
Kamala is better than Biden?
Why do you see that she's worse than Biden, sir?
It's not me. It is Trump is actually portraying Kamala because he portrays as a too progressive, especially when it comes to transgender rights, when it comes to other progressive policies, because Biden seems much more a mainstream, but Kamala is a kind of like slightly on the left side of the spectrum.
Sir, why don't you read that Kamala Harris will advocate her own policies, not the policies of Joe Biden?
So, there are things that, the Kamala will pretty much continue with the Biden policies, but what we see, Biden has so low approval rate. It's about 30%. And there is no history that suggests that with this approval rate, the incumbent will win the race. So this is why Kamala trying to distract herself. And especially when it comes to war in Gaza, Kamala is pretty much critical about what Israel is doing. I think this is the most distinctive foreign policy when it comes to Biden and Kamala, I can say.
Great, sir. Sir, to what extent could voter turnout in battleground states influence legal disputes around the election's final outcome?
Yeah, so actually Trump is pretty much preparing after the election. He several times mentioned that he's not going to accept if he loses the election. So this is something problematic, and there is so much doubt and suspicion about the election integrity. There are volunteers on the field, ready to dispute the election. So this election can actually, the counting can go weeks and weeks if it is too close. But if there is a landslide, I think it's going to be much more clear outcome. But otherwise, it can take weeks and weeks to decide who's going to be the next president.
Sir, how might Harris's emphasis on social justice and immigration reform affect legal frameworks if she or the Democratic Party gains more influence? When
it comes to immigration, Democratic Party, I think this is on the weakest side of their policies, and the Trump is, pretty much focusing on stricter immigration policy, especially on the southern border. And the majority of public believes that Trump will do much better compared to Biden. So when it comes to social policy, especially, this is not 2020. I mean, the most concern is about economy in the United States and also abortion. I think in terms of how these two candidates approach to democracy, Kamala is winning in terms of how people think them. But Trump is seen, especially from young male voters, as a strong candidate. So he's getting so much support from this constituents. And also what we see is that Trump is doing much better compared to previous Republican candidates among Black and Hispanic population.
Okay, sir, what legal challenges could arise if election results in critical states fall within the margin of error?
So, what we see is that, especially with the polls, these 7 states, the election polls come up with very slight, very thin, and it is within the margin of error. And what we can say, if these polls, are not so biased, so yeah, that can create so much legal challenges, especially, what Trump did after 2020 elections, that, Stop the Steal campaign and the January 6th. So there is so much concern about political violence. And I see federal government, especially FBI, is prepared for it and ready for it. And there are several security measurements to protect the election workers, election volunteers. And I think this can be, this is very contentious, and the state government and federal government are prepared for it.
Okay, sir, your narrative in terms of election law, how does media coverage and public engagement legally benefit or complicate campaigns like Trump's and Harris's?
So what can I say about the media is, I think this election cycle was so much profitable. So they spent, 2 candidates in total spent $3.5 billion only for ads. So it's 3.5. So with B, this is, I think, this is a high record, and most of these ads goes through these swing states. So the media coverage, I can say, as we all know, there is a kind of ideological spectrum over the media. If you watch CNN, you're going to see a different picture. If you watch Fox TV, you're going to see a different picture. So there is so much attention on those, even with the traditional media, not only for social media. And what we see, Elon Musk's support for Trump seems to be kind of a kind of energizer for the Trump team as well.
Okay, great, sir. How does the United States election law address concerns over last-minute campaigning, potentially impacting undecided voters, which is very important at this point, the undecided voters, sirs, and the impact in this election?
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of the turning point. Who's going to win these undecided voters at the last time, and what are the things that actually bring them to the polls is a big question. But this is not a kind of, we don't have a decisive picture. It's pretty much toss up at this point. Whether whether Harris wins or Trump wins, it's not going to be a surprise for us and for the public, because there is no clear picture about who's going to win. There is a kind of slight chance. I mean, I can say 51 to 49 for Harris. But, if you remember 2016 polls, they were so much, for Hillary Clinton, but there were so much biases in terms of their predictions. So this can be a scenario here. But what also we see that these polls companies try to compensate this kind of gap. And we don't know whether they overcorrect or undercorrect these potential biases in their polls.
So what do you predict, sir, at this point?
Could you please repeat the question? Sorry.
What do you predict?
Okay, so what I can say is a 50-50. I don't have, I'm asking this question for myself, but, it's not clear to me. So it's 50-50%, I will say.
Okay, sir, could we expect any constitutional or legislative reforms as a result of this election, especially regarding divisive issues like healthcare, immigration, and economic policy?
Okay, yeah. So, the Trump will say there will be massive changes, especially I expect from for immigration. So it's going to be a stricter border control if Trump wins the election. And the other item can be related, especially related to NATO partnership, because also Trump is pretty much suspicious about the United States support for Ukraine. So this is going to be, I think, a major policy change in the field if Trump wins. So when it comes to Harris, I don't see a major change in the policies. Pretty much it's going to be extension of Biden administration.
Okay, sir. Of course, we are watching and awaiting and complete coverage and continuous coverage of the U.S. elections. We thank you so much, Professor, for being with us from Washington, D.C. Thanks for your insights, and stay tuned for more coming up here on Qnews. Elections officials across the United States, especially in swing states, have pledged to uphold the integrity of the vote and urged voters not to be misled by conspiracy theories. As millions of Americans prepare to head to the polls across the country, election officials and law enforcement authorities say they are focused on administrating a fair and safe election under a cloud of threats, online disinformation, and the potential for a grueling legal fight in the weeks ahead. In the heart of northern New Hampshire, the small town of Dixville Notch has kicked off U.S. Election Day with its traditional midnight vote. At midnight, the town's 6 registered voters gathered at the Tilston Room of the Balsams Resort to cast the first votes on Election Day. This year's vote in Dixville Notch was notable, with a tie between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, each receiving 3 votes, in contrast to the 2020 election, where this small community voted in favor of President Biden, granting him 5 votes while Trump received none. For further analysis, we are joined from Cairo by Mr. Khalid Dawood, the Assistant Editor-in-Chief of Al Ahram newspaper. A very warm welcome, sir, and it's a pleasure to have you with us on this very special day. Sir, how have the political legacies of past presidents, especially Barack Obama and Donald Trump, shaped the current election and the candidates' messaging?
Well, I mean, actually, there is a similarity between the Democratic candidate, former President Barack Obama, and Kamala Harris, that they both are seeking or actually are setting an unprecedented choice for the American people. Mr. Barack Obama was the first African-American president to be ever elected in the U.S. History. And right now we have the Vice President Kamala Harris, who's actually not only the first woman, but also a woman candidate, but also the first candidate with a colored background, even a very mixed background, representing a very American story, as her father is from Jamaica and her mom originates from India. So that's kind of the double challenge in terms of both the gender aspect of Ms. Harris being the first, if elected, she would be the first woman president, and at the same time being of a mixed race, which even makes her job much more difficult in challenging Donald Trump, who's actually has his own legacy through the 4 years he spent in office between 2016 and 2020. So probably that's a good kind of chance to let American voters consider whether they want another 4 years of Mr. Trump, with all the kind of shortcomings that surrounded his presidency, all the scandals, and of course all the bitterness that came after Trump lost the 2020 elections, something which he does not recognize until today, and actually shaped or made up a very key issue in his current campaign against Kamala Harris, the fact that elections were stolen from him, that he is fighting against not just Kamala Harris, but against the Democratic establishment, which he claims has abused the U.S. justice system to kind of prosecute him with at least 4 major cases, all aimed at preventing him from running in the current elections as a Republican nominee in the first place. And all this, of course, the legacy of both candidates, Harris and Mr. Trump, they both add to the excitement and to the intensity of the current elections.
Sir, what impact has the ongoing polarization of American politics have on voter behavior, especially in terms of party loyalty versus voter dissatisfaction?
Well, I mean, actually, you brought up the most actually decisive matter in this current elections, this status of polarization among the American public in general. You're talking almost about a 50-50%. I mean, in all previous elections, there was a chance that polling before the elections would give a lead to one candidate or the other, even in the last days before the elections. But this one election has been very significant in the fact that up until a few hours ago, actually, I mean, the outcome has shown either a tie or maybe Harris leading 1 point here or Mr. Trump leading 1 point there, but all they fall in what they call the range of error. So basically, it's been very difficult to make a prediction in which direction this election would go because of the division and the polarization in the American society, which actually many experts on U.S. politics date back to the days when Barack Obama became a U.S. president, becoming the first African-American president. And this probably galvanized the American conservative right. And then came up the populist, Mr. Trump, who managed to actually make a very surprising victory against a veteran Democratic politician, former Secretary of State and former First Lady Hillary Clinton. It was a surprise for everyone. But then actually, instead of being sufficed with ousting him from the White House in 2020, the kind of his own scandals followed up, his language, his rhetoric, added to the divisiveness and the fear, actually. I mean, let me add, beside the parity in the stand of both candidates, the serious fear in these elections about possible violence because of this polarization and the possible repetition of the 6th of January 2021 events, when supporters of Trump were very much raided the U.S. Capitol to prevent the accreditation of Biden's victory, a matter which continues to follow Mr. Trump until today. The Democrats considering that he was committed in inciting violence, and they even sought to put him on trial for this. They failed because of the Supreme Court, and at the same time, the language which Mr. Trump has been using about that he knows, that he's certain that he's going to be a winner, and that if he lost elections, there will be something wrong with the voting system itself. All this adds up to the fears that the current polarization in the American society between liberals, conservative, those who support abortion, those who are against abortion, the attitude towards the economy might end up in some sort of violence, particularly if Trump ended up losing again, because this will most likely mark the end of his career, considering his age at like 78, and how the tables have turned against him. And when he was running against Biden, the entire argument was that he was running against an unfit president who is like the oldest in U.S. history, 82 years old. But right now, he's been suddenly changed, recognizing the shortcomings of Mr. Biden, and he's facing Kamala Harris, who is 20 years younger than him.
Sir, you mentioned the January 6th insurrection and subsequent events. Have you any concerns about election security and democracy influenced voter trust in the electoral process, sir?
Actually, they're very high. I mean, if you've been following the news coming out of Washington, D.C. in particular, I mean, there's been a state of highest alert. I mean, particularly around the symbols of U.S. politics, starting with the White House. We've seen how the walls have been kind of supported, heightened, and as well, of course, the famous U.S. Capitol building, which witnessed the January 6, 2021 events that you are referring to, as well as the Constitutional Court. So all the kind of symbols of U.S. politics and power are now under surveillance by the FBI. There's a similar state of alert in most of the so-called swing states, which are likely to determine the outcome of elections, the 7 famous swing states where basically these states, they change their vote possibly every 4 years, every 8 years, or at least the results are always very close between the two candidates, that it might flip to this side or to that side. So also security is a matter of concern in those states. And I think matters, actually would be more worrying if Mr. Trump lost the elections. If you even watch the last speech he made yesterday, he again referred to standing up against a democratic conspiracy, against voting machines that do not follow the wishes of those who actually vote. His repeated warnings about an invasion, illegal immigrants taking part in the voting. I mean, all those kinds of issues, and even some language threatening violence. I mean, he even referred recently to the daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney, a prominent Republican that decided to support Harris, that, he wouldn't mind seeing her being shot, or the journalists being shot. So this kind of language adds to the fears of possible violence, particularly if Trump lost the election.
Okay, sir, how are candidates addressing the growing concerns about climate change and environmental policy, especially in battleground states where climate disasters have become more frequent?
Climate change has been definitely important on the agenda of both candidates, but it's not the top issue this time. I mean, again, the top issue this time is the economy, the state of inflation, the increasing prices, and of course, Trump made a big deal out of the immigration issue, and considering it one of the key weaknesses of Vice President Kamala Harris, the matter of crime, considering or accusing the Democrats of being soft on crime. These are the kind of, and of course, the subject of abortion that Mrs. Harris has depended highly to mobilize voters on her behalf, particularly women voters. I mean, this is, again, if you look at it, it's between maybe white America that supports Mr. Trump to a large extent, the diverse America, including whites, of course, that are more open and might accept a minority representative becoming president, but it's also a divisiveness over major social issues such as abortion and climate change. Because, again, as you know, Trump has always been one of those skeptics on the issue of climate change, and one of the first measures actually.
Mr. Khaled Dawood, you made your point clear, sir, and of course we thank you so much for your informative knowledge and for adding to our coverage, sir, the Assistant Editor-in-Chief of Al-Ahram newspaper. Thank you for your insight, sir. As the 2024 presidential election unfolds, American voters are making their voices heard at polling stations nationwide. We now go to Rihem Morsi for further in-depth analysis into the United States election process.
As the November elections are upon us, both Democrats and Republicans are facing significant rifts within their parties that could redefine their futures. With Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump navigating complex voter sentiment, especially regarding foreign policy and domestic issues, the stakes are higher than ever. The ongoing conflict in Gaza adds another layer of urgency, challenging party unity and influencing voter turnout as candidates grapple with their positions on international crises. As we are here on November 5th, the landscape of American politics feels more fragmented than ever before. Democrats once united behind the leadership of Kamala Harris, but the party now finds itself at a crossroads. A growing chorus of progressives are questioning their party's commitment to bold reforms and feeling increasingly sidelined by moderates who seem more cautious than ever. This sense of alienation raises urgent concerns about the party's direction and its ability to resonate with the younger voter who hold the key to the future. Meanwhile, the Republican Party is grappling with its own internal strife. A deep divide has emerged between traditional conservatives and the populist faction loyal to Trump. Trump influence has shifted the party's focus towards nativism and economic populism, alienating many longtime conservatives who once felt at home in the GOP. Recent primaries have laid bare these fractures, showcasing candidates who often espouse extreme views that risk pushing away moderate voters. Across the political spectrum, many citizens are expressing frustration with the directions of their parties. This discontent has sparked a growing urgency for change as the election looms on the horizon. For Democrats, the challenges lies in relaying behind Harris and harnessing the energy of progressive activists. For Republicans, the struggle is to reconcile Trump's overwhelming influence with the desires of more traditional party members. The stakes are high, with these internal divisions holding the potential to shape voter turnout and influence candidate selection, leading to unexpected outcome for this election. As social issues like immigration and voting rights emerge as a flashpoint, the ability of both parties to present a united front becomes increasingly complicated. Regardless of the election's outcomes, the internal divisions are likely to persist, compelling both parties to reevaluate their identities and strategies moving forward.
This brings us to the end of our special coverage on Election Day in the United States. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.